So today we're going to start section 9.2. 9.2 we're going to talk about solving equations that are going to use two operations. So our two operations that we're focusing on, remember, are addition and multiplication. But with our addition operation and our addition property of equality, that can also mean that we're using subtraction. And then with our multiplication property, that can also mean that we're using division. So as we're looking at this list of steps, we see 5 steps that are illustrated here. Notice that step 3 and 4 are in bold because those are going to be the steps that we're going to be focusing on in these sections. So our first step, if we have a more complicated equation, we are going to use our distributive property, which we talked about in the previous chapter, and then do some simplifying of our equation. We're not necessarily going to worry about these so much in section 9.2. We're going to see more of these steps in section 9.3, or maybe one of the very last examples that we're going to run into in section 9.2. So as we're doing these, again, we're focusing on step 3 and 4, where the actual solving of our equation takes place. So notice that step 3 says get all variables on one side of the equation and all of our numbers on the other side. Our numbers being our non-coefficient numbers. So our numbers being our constant terms, our numbers that are all by themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the number on one side and the variable on the other side. Now we can do this in a variety of different ways. As we are working through this step, we are thinking about addition and subtraction. And so we're either adding or subtracting things on each side of our equation to get things to disappear on one side of our equation. Now, in order to remain pretty consistent, for the most part, you're going to see me eliminating the number on the left side of the equation and then the variable on the right. However, you can choose to interchange left and right here. You can choose to interchange the numbers into variables. All that really matters is that you get rid of one thing on one side and the other thing on the other side. Then once we've done this, right, the last key step to solving any equation is going to be to get rid of a coefficient if we have a coefficient. And if we have a coefficient, right, that means that we want to divide to get rid of that coefficient that's out front. And that's going to leave us with the variable alone. So for step 4, we're thinking that we're going to use division to get this variable all by itself. Then when we're finally done, we can go back through, we can check our solution. We check some solutions in section 9.1 at the very beginning, one of the very first examples. And as we go through a couple of these here and there, you'll see me do some solution checking. I strongly recommend that you check solutions before you put your answers in. However, at the same point in time, this is kind of almost a more optional step. But the nice thing is, on a quiz, on a test, you should be able to check your own answers and make sure that the answers that you are entering for your variable are going to be correct. Okay, so before we get into these two-step equations and working through a lot with steps 3 and 4, we're going to start by reviewing our one-step equations that we saw in the previous chapter. So as we look at this next example, or this first example I should say, and we look at these, our goal is to get rid of whatever number is next to our variable. Again, we can use whichever operation we choose to use. So if we look at example A, x plus 3 equals negative 7. Well, we're going to get rid of a positive 3 by subtracting 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. On the left side, they cancel. We're left with x. Negative 7 and negative 3, same sign, so we add, we get negative 10. Right, for B, we have a negative 5 next to our x. We're going to get rid of a negative 5 by adding 5 to both sides. These are going to cancel. We're left with x. Negative 12 plus 5 is going to give us negative 7. Right, for C, well, we're going to start by multiplying both sides by 3. Because right now x is being divided by 3, we want to cancel out the division by multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3 because that's what's in our denominator. So on the left side, we're just left with x. On the right side, 15 times 3 gives us 45. And then for D, we have negative 4x equals 28. We're going to divide both sides by negative 4. because -4 is our coefficient. Our coefficient is written as a multiplication. We're going to get rid of that multiplication by dividing. X equals positive divided by negative is going to leave us with a -7. All right, so in this first example, we've just kind of talked a little bit about our rules. We've reviewed what we did in the last section, and then as we move on to an example 2, we're going to get into using these steps into solving our equations.